Okay, so this is the Bible study for Genesis chapter 32, and we're continuing the story of Jacob as he leaves Laban. So the text says, Jacob also went on his way, and the angels of God met him. When Jacob saw them, he said, "This is the camp of God." So he named that place Mahanaim. Jacob sent messengers ahead of him to his brother Esau in the land of Seir, the country of Edom. He instructed them, "This is what you are to say to my lord Esau. Your servant Jacob says, I have been staying with Laban and have remained there until now. I have cattle and donkeys, sheep and goats, male and female servants. Now I am sending this message to my lord that I might find favor in your eyes." When the messenger returned to Jacob, they said, "We went to your brother Esau, and now he is coming to meet you, and 400 men are with him." In great fear and distress, Jacob divided the people who were with him into two groups, and the flocks and the herds and the camels as well. He thought, if Esau comes and attacks one group, the group that is left may escape. Then Jacob prayed, "O God, my father, God of my father Abraham, God of my father Isaac, Lord, you who said to me, 'Go back to the country, to your country and your relatives, and I will make you prosper.' I am unworthy of all the kindness and faithfulness you have shown to your servant. I had only my staff when I crossed the Jordan, but now I have become two camps. Save me, I pray, from the hand of my brother Esau, for I am afraid he will come and attack me, and also the mothers with their children. But you have said, 'I will surely make you prosper and will make your descendants like the sand of the sea, which cannot be counted.'" He spent the night there, and from what he had with him, he selected a gift for his brother Esau: 200 male goats and 200 female goats and 20 male goats, 200 ewes and 20 rams, 30 female camels and their young, 40 cows and 10 bulls, and 20 male donkeys and 20 female donkeys and 10 male donkeys. He put them in the care of his servants, each herd by itself, and said to his servants, "Go ahead of me and keep some space between the herds." He instructed the one in the lead, "When my brother Esau meets you and asks, 'Who do you belong to, and where are you going, and who owns all these animals in front of you?' then you are to say, 'They belong to your servant Jacob. They are gifts sent to my lord Esau, and he is coming behind us.'" He also instructed the second and the third and all the others who followed the herds. "You are to say the same thing to Esau when you meet him. And be sure to say, your servant Jacob is coming behind us." For he thought, "I will pacify him with these gifts I am sending on ahead. Later, when I see him, perhaps he will receive me." So Jacob's gifts went on ahead of him, but he himself spent the night in camp. That night Jacob got up and took his two wives, his two female servants, and his 11 sons, and crossed the ford of Jabbok. After he had sent them across the stream, he sent over all his possessions. So Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him till daybreak. When the man saw that he could not overpower him, he touched the socket of Jacob's hip, so that his hip was wrenched as he wrestled with the man. Then the man said, "Let me go, for it is daybreak." But Jacob replied, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." The man asked, "What is your name?" "Jacob," he answered. Then the man said, "Your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with humans and have overcome." Jacob said, "Please tell me your name." But he replied, "Why do you ask my name?" Then he blessed him there. So Jacob called the place Peniel, saying, "It is because I saw God face to face, and yet my life was spared." The sun rose above him and passed Peniel, and he was limping because of his hip. Therefore, to this day, the Israelites do not eat the tendon attached to the socket of the hip, because the socket of Jacob's hip was touched near the tendon. All right. So remember that you can download PDF copies of this Bible study at www.abqnaz.org/alive so that you can follow along with us. Number one says, what did we learn about in the last Bible study? Now, it was sort of extensive, and I thought, well, if I put a blank here, people might not know or might forget. I was listening in on one of the Bible studies, and we had new folks, and perhaps the new folks got that question. That's not great. Um, so we don't know. So Laban's sons began to get jealous of Jacob and his prosperity, and they felt it was at the expense of their father. That's true. B, Laban's attitude toward Jacob also had changed. That's true. Jacob called his wives out to the field to tell them what was going on. Yes, that's true. They agreed and decided to leave without telling Laban. That's true. Rachel took Laban's household gods. That's true. Laban chased them down and overtook them and told them he should have been able to kiss his family goodbye and throw a party for them. And why did they steal his household gods? So that was kind of a tacked on. Why did you do all this? Okay, maybe I get why you did all this, but I don't understand this. Um, and then, of course, I kind of skipped over, but they searched for those and didn't find them because of Rachel and where she was hiding them. She's kind of a trickster, apparently. Ultimately, they made a treaty and that they would not pursue each other and that Jacob would treat Laban's daughters well. That's true. And then Laban kissed his family and went on his way. So Laban went on his way, and then it begins the text today. What is happening now in 32, 1 and 2, Jacob also went on his way. And by the way, the angels of God met him while he was going on his way. And when Jacob saw him, he said, "This is the camp of God." So he named it Mahanaim, which means two camps. Um, and sometimes it's really obvious what that means, or you know, and sometimes it's a little bit cryptic. But Jacob is noticing God being with him, so we definitely see a difference um, in Jacob, I would say, from when he went to Laban to when he comes back, and how much he interacts with God. Honestly, um, before there was a lot of, God of my father Abraham, my father Isaac. We're going to read just in a moment, or we already read, but we're going to talk about that Jacob adds on God's interactions with him when he talks to him this time. And he notes that God is with him and God has said he was going to be with him. So what did Jacob do in 32, 3 through 5? Jacob sent messengers ahead of him to his brother Esau in the land of Seir, the country of Edom. So I think this is like something I just want to stop and note, because in later in the Old Testament and then in the New Testament, we sometimes hear of the land of Edom, and most people don't know what that means, and we have to kind of educate and say, oh, so this is Jacob, who was Israel, not at this point at the beginning of this text. Um, so Jacob is, and Esau is Edom, that's his brother. Um, so Yeah, so that's helpful to remember. What message did the messengers bring back to Jacob according to 32:6? They said, your brother is coming out to meet you and he's bringing 400 men. So that sounds like an army. Now, we don't know at this point what Esau's intent was. And I would say, even at the point where we find out what Esau did, I would say we still don't know what his original intent perhaps was to do. Um, so that is a scary thought. I mean, Jacob wronged Esau. Jacob tricked Esau. Jacob messed Esau over, and that's why he fled, at least in part. So now he's coming home. God said he would protect him, but this is scary. So number three says, how did Jacob respond according to 32, 7 through 16? Um, in great fear and distress, he divided the people who were with him and all his flocks into two groups so that at least one of them would be able to escape if Esau attacked. So let's divide up so that I have something to start over with if he attacks and kills one entire herd or group of servants and everybody. But it sounds like he divided it up evenly enough that Esau could reasonably have thought he killed them all off. So then Jacob could still escape and rebuild with the other half. So this is a defensive measure because he's pretty sure Esau is going to come and attack him. Then, after he did that, Jacob prayed, God, you told me to come here and that you would take care of me. And this is kind of a paraphrase. This is kind of what he said. Now he says, oh God of my father Abraham, God of my father Isaac, Lord, you who said to me, go back to your country and your relatives, I will make you prosper. So he's really crying out to him, and he's not just God of my father Abraham and my father Isaac anymore. God, you who said to me, you have promises for me. You said you would take care of me. You told me to come here. What's going on? Then Jacob prayed, just in case we think sort of Jacob is holding God by the throat of his promises. Jacob prayed, I am unworthy of your kindness and faithfulness and all the blessings you have brought me. So there is some humility to this. God, you told me to do this and you told me you'd take care of me. And I also know I'm not worthy of any of that, which I think is a significant balance to the other part. And then Jacob prayed, save me, I pray, from the hand of my brother. So he's asking specifically, save me. And he spent the night there and he selected a gift for his brother. Now, I just want to say, it doesn't say God told him to select a gift for his brother. Um, we don't know if, he divided people out for defensiveness. Um, so we have this, so we talk about this when we say, don't depend on your own strength, depend on God. But it is also true that God gives us guidance and direction in prayer on what to do that I think changes the outcome of situations. And we've talked about that recently. So I would say sometimes it's hard to tell the difference if we're just reading a story because we only know the heart of we only know the outside. We don't know the heart of the person, and we don't know the full discussion they had with God. So, if it weren't for this prayer, it would seem very much like, okay, Jacob's dividing up for defense, and then he's sending out gifts ahead in hopes that he can pacify his brother. Um, and I think he's trying to handle this in his own strength. But we also know that he went to prayer, and and it's possible that in the process of going to prayer, God gave him some direction. So maybe he did the first thing, with his own wisdom, but then he went to God and God gave him a second thing to do. But I would just say that God often gives us direction that can change the outcome of a situation if we handle it a different way than maybe we were prone to handle it or we had intended to handle it. And so it doesn't say God told him to select a gift for his brother, but it happens right after prayer. And so, we're left thinking, that seems like a good idea in human wisdom. Sometimes that's a bad thing when it comes to God. Sometimes human wisdom we throw out the window when it comes to God, but sometimes, God tells us to do things um, that they may be good wisdom, but they may not be what we would tend to do. This is a large gift. This isn't a small gift that he's given to Esau, and so most of us might have rather fought than give up such a large gift. Um, Anyway, number five, what happened in 32:22 through 26? A. Jacob sent his wives and all his possessions across the ford of Jabbok, and he stayed behind. B. Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him till daybreak. Not alone. Alone, but not alone, obviously, but alone in terms of all his people and possessions. Some random person came out of the wilderness. C, when the man saw that he could not overpower him, he touched the socket of Jacob's hip so that his hip wrenched and he wrestled as he wrestled with the man. D, the man said, "Let me go, for it is daybreak." And then E, Jacob replied, "I will not let you go until you bless me, or unless you bless me." Um, so there's a classic story, a very important story. Um, honestly, um, so if you were in this situation and you sent your wives and everybody ahead of you, I know you don't have wives, don't have wives. Um, but you sent all your possessions ahead of you, what would you be doing? So part of me, I want to, when we apply this text, we almost always apply this text to prayer. None of us, I think, that I'm aware of, nobody that I have met, has ever physically met a man, wrestled with him physically, and said, "Yeah, that was surely God that I saw face to face." We apply this text to prayer. And I think appropriately, because what would Jacob have been doing after he sent everybody ahead? He is in a desperate situation where he needs God, or else he's going to be destroyed. We talked a few weeks ago in our Sunday message about radical obedience. So as bad as Laban treated him, his life was stable. Now he's going back to Esau, and everything he's built for the last 20 years could all be destroyed because he has enmity with his brother. That Esau wants to kill him. I think swore to kill him. And so now he's coming back 20 years later to meet Esau, who he cheated or tricked, and and he's got wealth, and he doesn't know anything of Esau. All he knows is when he sent messengers to Esau to say, "Hey, I'm coming. Will you receive me?" Um, then Esau immediately marched out with 400 men. That sounds like battle. That sounds like, and so he's desperate. So he's going to prayer in desperation, and there's this physical sort of instantiation of his prayer where he is physically and literally wrestling with a man. And so when it gives us some handles on what prayer in this sort of situation might look like for Jacob, um, we we don't know. Like this wasn't just a vision. If it was a vision, how would he come out of it with his hip wrenched? There was something physical going on with him. So God, we don't know. Maybe random man, maybe crazy man, that has left all civilization and is drooling in his beard and whatever. We don't know what sort of man this is at this point. So, number six, what did the man say next? Um, so, um, Jacob said, "I'm not going to let go unless you bless me." And the man said, "What is your name?" And then Jacob answered, Jacob. And how did he respond? The man responded to Jacob answered. He said, "Your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with humans and have overcome." Okay, I've talked a little bit about how we apply this or how we tend to apply this. So, because I think most of us probably, maybe you're studying this text and this is the first time you've ever heard this story. But I would say if you've been in church for any length of time, you have heard this story before. And in hearing this story, you've probably heard it in the context of applying it to desperate prayer, um, and a desperate need that we have that we need God to meet. So I don't think I gave away sort of the ending, but you know, if you were reading this for the first time, who would you assume this man was? So it says, who was this man? Well, he wouldn't tell Jacob his name, so who knows? Um, yeah, I mean, maybe Esau snuck out there in the dark and was spying to see how many people Jacob had, and he was wrestling with Esau. Maybe some rando is living in caves out there because he doesn't get along with people very well, and he's, maybe he's, I don't know. He doesn't tell Jacob his name, so we don't know. Yet, there are some clues, and the main clues are how Jacob responds to the whole experience. B, why would Jacob believe this man could bless him? Some random man in the wilderness who can't wrestle past daybreak. So he can't wrestle past, like, let go of me, it's daybreak. I gotta go hide. I gotta go get inside. Maybe it's a vampire. That vampires aren't real. That's not a thing, but I feel like I have to just clarify. But we don't know. But this guy can't wrestle past daybreak. So he's gonna go. So where is he gonna go? The man renames Jacob, saying he has wrestled with God and with humans, and he has overcome. When did he wrestle with God? So he's obviously done some wrestling with humans. It seems like he's wrestled with Esau, maybe not, probably physically, they're brothers, all the way from the womb, but definitely in terms of wrestling for power, he's wrestled with Laban. He's wrestled with Laban's children, his sons that are accusing him. He's wrestled with humans, but when did he wrestle with God? Um, and that leads us to believe that the man is saying something about who he is. Um, then D, Jacob says afterwards, as he names the place, that he has seen God face to face, and yet his life was spared. So Jacob responded, I've seen God face to face. This was God. Let me just say that in scripture, we know that Jesus is the Son of God. We know that Jesus, the scripture tells us, was from the beginning. Everything was made through him, and nothing was made without him. Um, so he was from the beginning. The Son was from the beginning and was born into human form in the form of Jesus. That's a distinction that theologically is probably important to make. But so the Son of God, the Word of God, God's revelation of Himself to humans, in perfect human form, um, shows up in the New Testament. There are a couple places, at least two or three places in the Old Testament, where it seems like God Himself shows up. And oftentimes it is in the form of a mystical figure that we can't define their origin. We can't define where they come from. So Melchizedek's king of Salem, um, came out to meet Abraham. We talked about that. So Jesus is called a priest in the line of Melchizedek, as distinguished from a Levitical priest. And but some of us are saying, Melchizedek, where did he come from? He just shows up out here and he's the priest of the Most High God, and Abraham gives him a tenth of everything. Um, um, King of Salem means King of Peace. We call Jesus the Prince of Peace. I mean, there's these parallels. Was he really Jesus? Was he really God in human form? I don't know. It's a mystical thing. I wasn't there. I don't know. But honestly, that story does not change depending on whether he was or wasn't. That doesn't change the point of the story. In this case, I don't think it changes the point of the story either. Jacob felt that this was someone who could bless him, and he was wrestling with him in a moment of distress, in a moment where he needed God, and he needed the blessing of God. He needed God's protection, and he was wrestling with this man, and this man said, "You've wrestled with God and with humans, and you have overcome. You're no longer Jacob, usurper. You're Israel, the one who wrestles with God." Um, and there's just something significant that happened here, and it seems like both the man and the things that Jacob said would lead us to believe that this man with no origin, no where he came from and where he's going, we don't know, just seems to be, at very least, a representation of God. Um, so then Jacob says afterwards, as he names the place, that he has seen God face to face. I think I said that. This encounter apparently becomes legendary. The entire people of Israel recognized a specific ritual to commemorate this moment. So it is really clear what they thought happened. So, obviously, I don't think they're eating humans, but this leg tendon, this hip tendon, in whatever they do eat, they don't touch it, they don't eat it because it is essentially touched by God. Now, did God command them not to eat it? It doesn't say that here. Um, maybe we'll find that later. I don't know, but it doesn't say that here. But it says that's what they do to recognize God's touch to Jacob, and ultimately God's salvation of Jacob in the meeting with Esau that we have not seen yet. So here, this is what Jacob is apparently praying about, apparently wrestling with God all night, sort of figuratively, but physically, really wrestling with God. Um, and until he gets the outcome that he seeks, which is kind of funny because ultimately God's already promised his outcome. God's already and Jacob yet is still crying out to God, God protect me. And so he knows that God has promised it. But he's spending this time with God, desperately saying, I need you to fulfill your promise. And that there's some humility in that. But also boldness in it. How does that come together? The humility and the boldness comes together, to say, I need you to bless me. I need it so much, I'm not going to let go until you bless me. And ultimately, the blessing is one that God has already promised. But here's the thing is Jacob has no peace about it. He has fear. He has stress. He doesn't know what's going to happen, and he needs to know that God is going to be there. He needs to know that God is going to be in this and fulfill his promise to him. And he is not going to let go of God until he has peace on this. And so all night till daybreak, he wrestles with God. And that's how we apply this text. So the last says, what truth could we or should we apply to our lives based on this text? Um, so, um, we could say, wait for some random guy in the wilderness to come and try to wrestle you, and then, hold on until you get a blessing. Um, I'm not sure that is a very beneficial interpretation. But I would say that when you find yourself in crisis and you know that you need God, and even though God has promised that he would come through, you don't have peace or confidence in that because you're so afraid or so worried about the outcome, and it doesn't look good. And you know that unless God comes through, then you're in trouble. When you go to prayer, it should look like this. You should be wrestling with God in prayer. And I'm not sure, uh, you know, I'm not sure that the real most significant outcome of this is that God says, okay, I'll make sure that Esau doesn't kill you, because God's ultimately already promised to take care of him. So is the real outcome of this night of wrestling, is the real outcome that God decides to help him once he holds on? Or is the real outcome that finally Jacob has peace that God will help him? And he has held on and refused to let go of God, the God who can save him, the only one that can save him. And God has not only committed to fulfill his promise to bless him in the way that he already was going to, but honestly has given Jacob peace as he goes into the situation, so that the next day when things are set into motion, that he can have peace through all of it. And honestly, I think that is, for me, historically has been the most important outcome of prayer. I know we say prayer moves the hand of God, and I believe that it does. I believe that God answers prayer, but I think often when we go to prayer, we're asking for things that God has sometimes already promised, but we don't believe him. We don't have trust. We don't have peace. And so the wrestling with God is a wrestling until we're so sure, honestly, that he's real, that we can grab onto him, that we're so sure that he is a true and physical, real presence in our life, that we can have peace because we know he's actually going to act. And so it's us who changes in prayer. That wrestling changed Jacob, not God. Um, and that's something that I think we need to understand about prayer, and I think often don't. And I think that's something that I've been relearning through this story in Genesis, is how much prayer changes me even more than it changes the mind of God, as we sometimes think. But prayer changes me.